Mr. R.C. Bhargav, one of the founders of the Indian automotive industry, dignitaries on the dais, ladies and gentlemen, members of the media. I'm very, very happy to be with you all this morning to first of all felicitate Mr. Bhargav on one of the most distinguished careers in Indian business and in building up a fantastic company. So I'm very, very honored to be here this morning to be able to participate in this felicitation. I'm also very happy to be with you all today because I know what an important role you all play in the Indian economy. You are one of the largest generators of jobs. You contribute tremendously to the Indian economy in terms of products and services for both our rural and our urban consumers. And the work that you've done so far in promoting and encouraging Make in India and the work you will do in the future will be extraordinarily important for the Indian economy. So I'm very, very glad to be with all of you this morning. What I thought I might do this morning is to spend perhaps 10 minutes telling you a little bit about what was the economy that we inherited, what have we done with it, and where are we headed at this point. And then I'll speak for about 10 or 12 minutes. I'll keep my remarks relatively short. And then I'll let you all ask me questions. Because I know it's the time of the budget, all of you are thinking about your businesses and what's happening in the economy, and I'm sure you'll have plenty of questions to ask me. Is that okay? Or would you like me to speak instead? I can go on, but questions are better. All right. So let me first tell you what it was like in May 2014 when we inherited the economy from the UPA government. I don't know if you all remember, it's almost 2 years ago now. But at that time, virtually every macroeconomic and economic indicator was flashing red. The fiscal deficit was very high. It was 4.4% officially, but obviously was much higher than that. The current account deficit was very high. Inflation had been running over 8 or 9% for 7 years. We had entrenched inflation in India, and that had been continuing for quite a while. In addition to that, savings and investments in India had really dropped. And by and large, people had lost faith in the Indian economy. There was no investment happening. Investment had come virtually to a standstill. And India was widely seen as a basket case globally. That was the situation that we inherited about 2 years ago. And perhaps in some ways even more pernicious, in some ways even more damaging, and in some ways even more destructive to our economy, was the fact that India was viewed around the world as a bastion of crony capitalism, a bastion of corruption, and a place where you could not invest because of all of these worries about rent seeking and being forced to pay major bribes. This was the situation that we inherited in May 2014. Now, you'll be pleased to know that in the last 18-20 months, we have completely transformed and changed this economic picture. Am I right about that or wrong? So, part of the problem in public life is that when you accomplish something, everybody immediately takes it for granted. But this was a very dire situation, ladies and gentlemen, a very dire situation. And what we did within 12 months, 18 months, and of course we benefited from the decline in oil prices, is we achieved macroeconomic stabilization. Achieving macroeconomic stabilization, as the IMF or the World Bank and others will tell you, is not something that happens in 12 to 18 months. It usually takes 2 to 3 years to achieve macroeconomic stabilization, turn around the macroeconomic indicators. And I remember it well, because in the first NDA government in 1998, we inherited a similar toxic brew of macroeconomic indicators. And it took Atalji's government 3 or 4 years actually to turn that around. And of course, they had to deal with the Asian financial crisis also at that time. So it took them 3 or 4 years to really turn around the macroeconomic parameters, but we achieved that in 12 to 18 months. Today, GDP growth rate is well over 7%. The current account deficit is about 1%. Inflation is running at about 5% right now. And savings and investments have picked up. And in fact, when you look at indicators such as foreign direct investment, those are up sharply. Around the world, ladies and gentlemen, around the world, foreign direct investment is declining. It's declining. In India, it's gone up 40%. And it's gone up 40%. It's gone up 40% because people now have faith in India. They have confidence in India. They know we've turned it around, and that's why today India has become a haven of stability in a very, very turbulent and volatile global economy. Sometimes, when we think about the Indian economy, we don't keep in perspective what is happening around the world. We certainly have benefited from lower oil prices. We have certainly benefited from lower oil prices. But there are other global trends that are in fact a very, very strong headwind, just like this is a tailwind. So for instance, as you know, because of the slowdown in China, commodity prices around the world have dropped dramatically. Oil, of course, has dropped, but so has cement, so has steel, so has aluminum. Many of these commodity prices have dropped, and that's channeling through. That's channeling through with very, very low economic growth, in fact, decline in GDP in countries like Russia, Brazil, Saudi Arabia, and so on. And as these countries deal with this meltdown in the commodity complex, they are investing less around the world, they are importing less, and as a result of that, there is a very big slowdown in exports as well. So what you get from the one hand with lower oil prices, you have to deal on the other hand with a global economic slowdown of unprecedented proportions that we are seeing right now. The world today, lest we forget, the world today is a very, very turbulent and dangerous place. And so to achieve this macroeconomic stabilization with this turbulence around us, to be seen as a haven of stability is something that we should all feel very, very good about. And ladies and gentlemen, and this is the part that we are emphasizing, it's happened because of the policies that we follow. If we had not channeled the decline in oil prices into higher taxes and of course reducing the fiscal deficit, bringing down inflation, we would not be this haven of stability. So it's not just happened by chance. It's not just happened by chance, it's actually happened by design because of the policies that we followed. So that's a very major accomplishment for our government in 12 to 18 months to be able to present to you this macroeconomic stability. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm sure none of you want to be in Brazil right now. Would you like to be in Brazil? Would you like to be in Nigeria? Would you like to be in Russia? Would you like to be even in China right now? So in that sense, we are actually doing very well, relatively speaking. Now, along with macroeconomic stabilization, which is because of the policies we've followed, we've also undertaken some very important, deep structural reforms. Now, one of the things everybody keeps asking us is, where are the big bang reforms? And I keep telling them, big bang lies in the eye of the beholder. Like beauty, a big bang reform lies in the eye of the beholder. So I'm not calling it a big bang reform, I'm just calling it deep structural reforms. And so if you look down the list and see what we've done in Make in India and ease of doing business, where we've already moved up from 142nd to 130th, and we're going to be in the top 100 very soon. Those are very deep structural reforms that we're pursuing in Make in India. We have also in the financial sector pursued very deep structural reforms. Do you know how many bank licenses were given out in the 10 years of the UPA government? Does anyone know? The answer is 0. Not a single bank license was given out in 10 years of the UPA government. In 18 months, we've given out 23 banking licenses. 23 banking licenses. With Jan Dhan Yojana, ladies and gentlemen, with Jan Dhan Yojana, in 100 days, we ensured that every single Indian household, 100% of Indian households had access to a bank account. And then what we are doing in terms of further opening up the financial sector, bringing FDI and insurance up to 49%, which by the way has resulted in over 10,000 crores of FDI. is really transforming the financial sector. So the whole financial sector has been radically reformed. Obviously with Indradhanush, we're really transforming the public sector banks as well. So manufacturing, make in India, very deep structural reforms. Financial sector, very deep structural reforms. Now there's one more area where we've done very, very historic and notable things, and that is in the area of social security. We are moving to a DBT regime, direct benefits transfer. And in this DBT regime, through Jan Dhan and through programs like Pahel, where we are directly depositing the subsidy that you're getting for a gas cylinder into your bank account, and through the direct payments that we're making for Narega and so on, we are changing the manner in which social security is delivered in India, directly into your bank account. And if we had not done Jan Dhan, this, ladies and gentlemen, would not have been possible. As I said, deep structural reforms. And so with this universal social security, we are also achieving very targeted subsidies, because for Pahel, we are making sure only the deserving people are able to get the subsidy that you should get with a gas cylinder. You'd be pleased to know that once we put in place Pahel, which is the direct transfer of gas cylinder subsidies, we found that sales of gas cylinders to commercial markets went up by 30-35%. Guess what? Where do you think these gas cylinders were going? They were going to restaurants and dhabas and so on. Once we stopped that, once we didn't allow you to have more than 12 gas cylinders and the subsidy payment was going into bank account, they were forced to buy gas cylinders, and that's why the price of gas cylinders went up. So that also is a very major structural reform that we've undertaken, the manner in which subsidies are put out. Then we have changed the fiscal architecture of the Indian state. Now you might say, well, that sounds very jargony. What does that actually mean? What does new fiscal architecture for the Indian state mean? I know you don't spend too much time thinking about how taxes are collected and paid, but this is actually of incredible importance in India. So we have changed through our plans for GST, through our plans for the direct tax code, and through the devolution to the states of tax money, the manner in which the entire fiscal architecture of the Indian state works. Let me tell you what that means for by GST. The reason why we need a constitutional amendment for GST is because we are subsuming the taxing powers of the center and the states into the GST Council. It's a fundamental transformation in the manner in which taxes are collected in this country. Do you understand why it's such a big thing? Because basically we are saying to every state, rather than you applying your taxing powers in the way that you think is appropriate, and the center doing what it thinks is appropriate, we will pool all those taxing powers together into one GST council and make this decision. This is a massive, massive change in the way indirect taxes are collected in India. Second very major aspect of the fiscal architecture is the devolution to the states of 42% of the divisible pool of tax revenues. Again, this may seem like jargon to you all, but the reality is that we now have got rid of the Planning Commission, which in previous days would decide how plan expenditure would be doled out to the various states. That's all gone. That money is going directly to the states. And the states are deciding how centrally sponsored schemes should work through a committee of the Niti Aayog. These are massive transformational changes to how taxes are collected and how taxes are distributed in this country. These are very, very deep structural reforms, and we think will enable the state, center plus the individual states themselves to be able to deliver much more responsive and much better public services to our citizens. So these are the kinds of major, major structural reforms that we have undertaken in the last 20 months. Now, with all of this underway, having transformed the economy from being a basket case to being a haven of stability, undertaking all of these deep structural reforms, the question is, where do we go from here? Our economic philosophy is very clear. We are a pro-poor government. We are a pro-poor government. और माननीय प्रधानमंत्री जी ने मई 20 को एक बहुत ऐतिहासिक भाषण दिया था, मई 20, 2014। पार्लियामेंट के सेंट्रल हॉल में उन्होंने जो भाषण दिया, उसमें उन्होंने कहा था कि हमारी सरकार गरीबों की सरकार है और गरीबों को समर्पित सरकार है। सो वी आर अ प्रो पुअर गवर्नमेंट, बट वी आर नॉट अ पॉपुलिस्ट गवर्नमेंट, वी आर अ प्रो पुअर गवर्नमेंट. And ladies and gentlemen, every government in India must be a pro-poor government. This is not a question of political necessity. This is our moral responsibility. It is our moral responsibility to be a pro-poor government and eradicate poverty in India. So as we think about our policies going forward, as we work on the budget, we are going to be a pro-poor government because ये हमारा राष्ट्र धर्म है, ये हमारा राज धर्म है. हमें गरीबों को पूरी तरीके से उद्धार उनको लाना, उनके लिए लाना है और उनको जिस गरीबी में वो पड़े हुए हैं उस गरीबी से उनको उठाकर एक बेहतर जिंदगी देना है. सो वी हैव टू बी अ प्रो पुअर गवर्नमेंट. बट बिकॉज लेडीज एंड जेंटलमैन वी आर अ प्रो पुअर गवर्नमेंट, वी आर ऑल्सो अ प्रो मार्केट government. We are also a pro-market government because unless industries flourish, unless competition flourishes, and unless, ladies and gentlemen, you flourish, we are not going to be able to create the resources, the opportunities, the tax revenues to really look after the poor and the destitute of this country. So our policies going forward will be pro-poor on the one hand, but also pro-market on the other hand. That is what we have to do, and that is the type of budget that we are putting together. Of course, you'll have to wait for February 29th to see what the result of this thinking is, but we are very much focused on all of this. I will end here. Thank you very much for listening to me. I'm happy to take any questions if you have.
So I was down in China recently, and one of the biggest benefits that I see there, specifically for used car retail, which is a key component in used car retail, which will change vehicles, is that it's one contiguous market across the end. It's not city-specific market, state-specific market. GST will probably become a reality in the next year or so, but road taxes are still state-specific subjects. Do you see anything happening on that front where cars truly become one market? The excise duty component will get standardized with GST, but what about on the road taxes front? Do you see something happening there?
Well, to the best of my knowledge, road taxes are not among the taxes that will be subsumed in GST. So potentially those will still remain unique to each state. But certainly as far as GST is concerned, as you yourself have pointed out, that will make a huge difference to be able to create a national market and enable you to create one supply chain across India. So that I think is really going to be transformational for India as I've just described it. And let's go one step at a time. Let's get GST done, and then we'll tackle the next step, which would be other taxes, such as road taxes.
So you've been talking of the growth in the macroeconomic factors of the Indian economy, but we as automobile dealers are feeling a lot of stress in the rural market. And the rural demand, which was actually driving growth of automotive and not just automotive, even the other consumer industries, seems to be tapering off, and the net surplus with farmers seems to be on negative. So any views on that is my first question. And the second question is to do with ease of doing business. We really look forward to your opening the shackles and making business much more easier. But what we find is that even Companies Act 2013, which was supposed to make it far more simpler, the voluminous Companies Act 2056 after 1956, but it seems to have got more difficult to even run a small private limited company under that. finally, the service tax regime, which definitely is the growth sector and which will simplify with GST coming in. But presently, we are grappling with the complexity of the service tax. Your views on that?
Well, that's a triple-decker question, isn't it? You asked 3 in 1. Let me just go through the various questions that you asked. First of all, you asked about rural distress. And you're absolutely right. We are in a situation in our rural economy where we've had 2 deficient monsoons. Last year's monsoon relative to long-term averages was deficient by 14%. And it's the first time in 30 years that we've had 2 deficient monsoons back to back. So this is quite a rare thing. The fact that we are still growing at 7.5%, despite the fact that we are facing this kind of rural distress, is in fact a real testimony to urban consumption and growth in services and so on. But there is in fact widespread agrarian distress because of the fact that we've had 2 years of deficient rainfall. Now obviously we have a variety of things that we're doing about this. This year itself, of course, we've paid out a lot more in terms of natural disaster spending, etc. I think the numbers are much, much higher than what we did even the previous year, number one. Number two, we also announced the policy that while previously 50% of your crop had to be damaged before you were eligible for compensation, today if 33% of your crop is damaged, you will of course get compensation. And then in addition to that, which I think is a real game changer, we've announced the Pradhan Mantri Fasal Bima Yojana, which is to introduce crop insurance. We obviously have to make our agriculture a lot more drought resistant. The reality, ladies and gentlemen, is that climate change is here to stay. And the net result of climate change is going to be that we are going to see more extreme weather events, more droughts, more cyclones. We're going to see far more erratic rainfall than we've seen in the past. And remember that traditional Indian agriculture has developed over thousands of years. And there are age-old practices as to how to grow our crops. These are now rapidly changing because of climate change. And so we have to undertake a variety of measures to really make our agriculture much more drought resistant, to be able to diversify people from traditional agriculture to high value agriculture like poultry farms, like dairy, like horticulture, like fisheries and so on. All of these things we are working on. So we absolutely have to deal with the rural distress, and of course you all are seeing that in sales of two-wheelers and so on because of the rural distress that we are seeing. It is a reality, we have to deal with it, number one. Your second question was regarding, sorry, ease of doing business. Now, ease of doing business, obviously we've undertaken a lot of different measures there. As I said, it's one of the deep structural reforms that we've undertaken. And we've already moved up very quickly from 142nd to 130. You don't typically move that quickly in the World Bank ease of doing business rankings. We are quite hopeful that we will get to 100 this time when it happens, and then we'll keep on improving. The Honorable Prime Minister has set us a target of being in the top 50. So that's a very good and aspirational target for us to meet, and so we are working on that. You have to remember that much of what can be done as far as the center is concerned is already underway. The action has now moved to the states. And for the states, what we've done is we've come up with a very long and comprehensive checklist. And we are now running the ease of doing business rankings for the individual states themselves. And some of the states are showing astonishing progress. My own state of Jharkhand has moved very quickly to being number 3 in the rankings. So those are the kinds of things that we are working on as far as that is concerned. Then we come to this issue of service taxes. Obviously, we are trying to streamline and make it much easier. As you know from the Chief Economic Advisor's report on GST, right now there are some 300 exemptions as far as services and goods are concerned. And we are trying to streamline that down to 90 or less. So we want to make service taxes, GST, all of that much, much easier. It's all going to be automated. It's all going to be digitized. So hopefully it will take a lot of the stress and a lot of the hassle that you face right now away from you. But we are determined and committed, as Honorable Prime Minister said over and over again, to be able to deliver on minimum government, maximum governance. That really is our slogan. Yes. Now, Companies Act, obviously, as you know, that's an ongoing. We've already brought in a series of amendments on Companies Act that has been passed. There's a committee under the leadership of Tapan Ray, who's the Secretary of Corporate Affairs, that has suggested another set of changes. You might want to look at that. That's already up for public consultation. Please take a look at that. Any other suggestions you have, please include that as part of the committee's inputs. And we'll see what we can do in terms of further streamlining and simplifying it. That's part of the legacy that we inherited, the Companies Act.
Sir, Mr. Sinha, good morning, Mr. Sinha. Abhishek here from Motor India.
Yes.
First of all, it's a very overwhelming speech. Thank you so much. Very enlightening. Got to know a lot of things. And your speech reminds me of the finance minister of Germany who spoke about the same thing 20 years back when Germany got reunified. So it's wonderful overview. Hats off to you. Thank you so much. And sir, as you know, automobile as a product is the most highly taxed product. And there are multiple layers of taxation and other things. Most of the CI members have said that, the sales will revive if all the taxes are removed. Do you think with the introduction of GST, it will be, this industry would be one of the most least taxed product, or the taxation issues which the industry is still grappling with? Yeah.
No, that's a very good question. We have been imploring and we have been pleading with our colleagues in the opposition, in the Rajya Sabha, to get GST passed. And the reason it's so important for India to get GST passed is precisely because of what you're saying. Prices will come down, your sales will go up. What are the three big advantages of the GST? Number one, as you're describing, there are layers and layers of taxes. So the cascading of taxes is going to end once GST is imposed, and prices of many important goods will come down. Right? Number one. Number two, obviously, as manufacturers, you all know that a lot of the logistics costs and a lot of the challenges you have of running a fragmented supply chain will be reduced. So your costs will also go down. And number three, for us, who are tasked with revenue collection on behalf of all of you, we will create a credit stream through GST that will enable us to make sure that people in fact are paying their taxes as they should. So GST is vitally important for India. Vitally important. And to continue to block the imposition of GST every day is hurting India. Every day is blocking consumers getting lower prices, jobs being created, sales going up. Every day is hurting us. So it's very important, and if you all have a chance, please talk to our colleagues in the Congress. Enable the Rajya Sabha to function, and let us do the job you sent us to do, which is to get important legislation passed and take this country forward. As you can see, you are in touch with so many people around the country. You are in touch with so many people around the country. We need your support to get done what this gentleman is asking us to do, which is absolutely your right. Thank you. Sir, no, please, one question at a time, because yes. There's a microphone right there.
What we see is, in spite of high rate of taxation, whether through sales tax or excise, the money given back to the industry, automobile industry, is coming down. It was 70–80% at one time. Today I am told it is even less than 6–7%. And against this, there are many developed countries who are paying even more than 100% against what they collect. So can we have some commitment that at least 10%, 15% would be plowed back to the industry in terms of road building or any other areas?
Last I checked, we had increased our road investments quite a bit. Am I right or wrong? Of course we have. Let me ask you all the following question. Do you think taxes in India are too high or too low? How many people believe that taxes in India are too high? Raise your hands. The majority, am I right in saying the majority of you all think that taxes in India are too high? You are wrong. Now, why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? Do you know what India's tax to GDP is? India's tax to GDP, center plus states, is somewhere between 15 to 17%. It's hard to calculate exactly the number, but it's between 15 to 17% of GDP. China is 20% of GDP. The OECD average, ladies and gentlemen, tax to GDP, OECD average, is 35%. Now you say taxes in India are too high? No, okay, now let's, so that is, no, this is all the taxes that are collected by all the governments of India are only 15 to 17% of GDP, when the OECD average, the developed country average is 35%. The number in the US is over 25%. Now, no. China is 20%. Now you will say, okay, our rates are too high. You would be wrong there as well. What is the maximum individual tax rate in India? 34.6%. I have spent 22 years in America. I have paid income taxes in the federal as well as in the state bracket. They are over 50% in the US between what you pay in federal taxes at the top tax rate plus what you pay in states. The top tax rate in the UK is 45%. So if you think taxes in India at a rate level are too high, 34.6%, you'd be wrong. Yes, in Singapore they're lower, in Dubai they're lower, in Hong Kong they're lower. But those are city states. You can't compare Dubai and Singapore and Hong Kong. Last I checked, neither of them had an army. So if you're saying that taxes in India are too high, it does not compute with the facts. Taxes in India are not too high. So whether you look at it on a tax to GDP, now you are saying let's have roads, you're saying let's have better public services, you are saying for God's sakes make sure that our army has ammunition, it has equipment, it has the right clothes, it's protected on the Siachen glacier. You have to pay taxes for that. And if you were in China, or you were in America, or you were in Europe, or in Japan for that matter, you'd be paying a lot more in taxes. We have our colleague here from Japan. He will tell you what is the highest marginal tax rate for individuals in Japan. 40 something. 40 something. So if the top individual tax rate in India is 34.6%, it's well below other large economies. So when people say taxes in India are too high, I'm not sure I understand that. Because whether you look at it in terms of our tax to GDP ratio, the amount of tax we are collecting as an economy, to support public services, the army, to make sure our children are not malnourished, or whether we look at it in terms of rates, I don't see how relative to global standards our taxes are too high. Have I persuaded you? Are you persuaded? What is, can anyone tell me why they're not persuaded? Well, let me explain. Let me explain on that also. Let me explain on that also. If you're saying the indirect taxes on vehicles are very high, what is going to happen is with GST, all of that is going to get straightened out. And you know what how the GST's tax structure is going to work. You're going to have a concessional rate, you're going to have a standard rate, and then you're going to have a top rate. That will bring down taxes on many, many products and services. So that in itself will bring down tax and services. Part of the reason why, let me tell you, part of the reason why taxes on automobiles are high is because in other areas people are not paying their taxes. And so what happens is you are suffering because other people are not paying their taxes. Do you understand? So I would suggest, I would suggest that you look very carefully to see where people are not complying as far as tax collection is concerned. And let us know, because then we'll make sure that they pay their honest taxes, because you are paying for other people's taxes, let's be clear. Obviously with GST it will come down. But the reason why the automotive industry is paying high taxes is because in other industries people are not paying their fair share of taxes. And if automotive industry is giving us 40%, that is still not amounting to more than about 15, 16, 17% of tax to GDP. So certain industries are paying high taxes like automotive. But this question was not about just the automotive industry. So please don't just think of it in terms of your industry. Think of it as a country. That was my question, which is, as a country, are we paying enough in taxes? Not whether the automotive industry is paying enough in taxes. I'll take one final question and then
Can I just make an observation?
Sure.
So this is picking up from Mr. Gupta's question about putting some of the money back into industry. So there are two things which actually your government is also pushing quite strongly. It's about electrification and hybrids and all that. Now today the issue is this does not make business sense because at the full cost of the vehicle, neither it is economic for the OEM, nor the operator, nor the customer who has to ride in these vehicles. So I think there was some outlay towards incentive. Even in the most developed markets where affordability to pay is more, these have only taken up with incentivization and China. So request is to really give this program a push. If you go to the expo, you'll see a lot of electric, the OEMs are ready, but what can we consider from the finance ministry as incentives to get these vehicles going? And secondly, the government is also looking to scrap 15-year-old, 20-year-old vehicles. Mr. Bhargav also mentioned about pollution. Again, here there is an issue around large numbers of people who are still using these. Some sort of an incentive to get this done. So just two areas maybe I hope your ministry is really thinking about.
Thank you. Those are both good suggestions. And typically in the budget making process, the line ministries, in this case the transport ministry or the industries ministry, will come forward with those proposals, and as finance and for the budget, we'll certainly look into that.
I believe they have come forward.
Okay. We'll take a look at it then. All right, I'm afraid I do have to run, but thank you very much. It was indeed a pleasure to be here, and once again, congratulations on all the wonderful work that you all are doing.